Have you ever seen a military vehicle that looks more like a garage experiment than a combat machine? What if I told you that some of the strangest and ugliest machines in history not only went into service, but actually made history on the battlefield? We're talking about machines that look like a fridge crossed with a tank, others that resemble an awkward tricycle trying to act tough in a war zone, and even tracked vehicles that became cultural icons. But behind every weird design, there's a function, a pressing need, and in many cases, brilliant engineering disguised as ugliness. If you grew up in the 70s, 80s, or 90s, chances are you've come across images of some of these metallic monsters in old encyclopedias, war documentaries, or dusty museum exhibits. And even if they looked bizarre back then, you'll be surprised to learn just how important these freaks of steel really were. But that brings up a question. Why would any army invest in something so weird, ugly, or downright improbable? That's exactly what we're going to find out now. Get ready for a journey through the most eccentric corners of military history, where design took a back seat and what really mattered was survival, improvisation, and getting the job done. Stick around to the end, because the last vehicle on this list will leave you speechless. It's that ugly and that brilliant. Halflinger. At first glance, the Halflinger 4x4 looks more like a golf cart with tractor wheels than a military vehicle. But don't let its tiny size and friendly face fool you. This little Austrian machine is a giant in disguise. Built by Steyr Daimler Puch in the 1950s, the Halflinger was born during a time when Europe was still recovering from World War II. The mission was clear: create a light, easy-to-maintain vehicle that could squeeze into narrow trails and tackle mountain terrain, especially in the Alps. It came with a small two-cylinder gasoline engine mounted in the rear, pushing around 24 horsepower. That might not sound like much, but considering it weighed under 600 kilograms, the power-to-weight ratio was impressive. With four-wheel drive and independent suspension on each wheel, the Halflinger delivered surprisingly capable performance on rough terrain. Visually, it looked like an unfinished prototype. No doors, an open-frame body, and boxy styling made it look more like a toy than a troop carrier. The cabin fit 2 soldiers and some light gear, and interestingly, the floor was so low it felt like the passengers were sitting right on the ground. Despite its awkward looks, the Halflinger saw wide use in the Austrian and Swiss military and even in other European forces. For mountain patrols, it was nearly unbeatable. Today, it's a collector's item among vintage military vehicle enthusiasts. Some restored models have even sold at auction for over $20,000. Think that's strange? Just wait. The next one is a motorcycle, tank, and tracked vehicle, all rolled into one. Kettengrad SdKfz 2. Now imagine this, a motorcycle mashed together with a tractor, and instead of a rear wheel, it has tank tracks. That's pretty much what German engineers created with the Kettengrad SdKfz 2, one of the most peculiar vehicles of World War II. Manufactured by NSU Motorenwerke in Germany in the early 1940s, the Kettengrad was designed as a light transport vehicle for terrain that stopped everything else. And despite its totally bizarre appearance, it performed incredibly well. Powered by a 4-cylinder, water-cooled engine borrowed from the Opel Olympia, a civilian car of the time, it produced around 36 horsepower, enough to pull light loads or small artillery pieces. Its rear track system gave it excellent grip on mud, snow, or sand. The single front wheel was used for steering on solid ground, but on rough terrain, the driver could lift it up and steer entirely with the tracks, making it feel like a miniature tank. The look? Straight out of a sci-fi movie. And no wonder, the Kettengrad even made an appearance in Saving Private Ryan. But few people know that some units were used long after the war, especially on German farms and rural roads. The cabin was tight, with the driver practically on his knees, and protection was minimal. But according to those who drove it, the experience was unforgettable, like riding a mechanical caterpillar. Feeling curious yet? Because the next one may be named after a goat, but it moves like a wild donkey. Gamma Goat M561. If there were an award for the weirdest military vehicle name, the Gamma Goat N561 would win it outright. But its looks and performance would probably landed a trophy too. Built in the United States during the 1960s, the Gamma Goat was designed as a tactical transport for extreme environments, capable of crossing mud, rivers, and dense jungles. The name comes from Gamma, after inventor Roger Gamont's articulation system, and goat, as in mountain goat, thanks to its climbing ability. It was powered by a 3-cylinder diesel engine producing around 98 horsepower. But what made it truly unique was its articulated body, 2 separate units connected by a flexible joint. This gave the vehicle a bizarre movement, almost like a metallic centipede, which even seasoned soldiers found strange at first. It had 6-wheel drive, independent suspension, and a floating rear body that let it cross water like a boat. The engine sound was loud and metallic, and combined with the vehicle's sway, many said it felt like riding a drunk horse on a roller coaster. At first, soldiers were skeptical, but soon they realized that despite its odd handling and twisted looks, the Gamma Goat could save lives in places where nothing else could go. In fact, there was a mission in Vietnam where the Gamma Goat was the only vehicle able to make it through a flooded jungle trail. Ugly, weird, noisy, but undeniably effective. Speaking of strange machines, the next one came from the frozen Canadian North and looks like a fridge on tracks. Bombardier Muskeg. Think you've seen it all when it comes to weird military vehicles? Then get ready for the Bombardier Muskeg, a machine that looks like a cross between a train car, a farm tractor, and a school bus, all riding on tank treads. Built by the Canadian company Bombardier, the Muskeg came from people who know how to deal with extreme cold. In Canada's brutal winters, armies needed something that could traverse frozen swamps, deep snow, and soggy ground without getting stuck. The Muskeg was powered by a V8 gasoline engine with around 160 horsepower, which was more than enough to carry troops, supplies, or heavy equipment. Despite its bulky and clumsy appearance, it was shockingly stable thanks to its wide tracks and reinforced suspension, designed for unstable ground. Inside, it was bare bones, simple seats, a minimal dashboard, and almost no insulation. Many soldiers joked that it felt like sitting inside a cold oven in the Arctic. The engine growl was deep and agricultural, echoing inside the metal cabin like an old farm machine. Even with its awkward design and lumbering gait, the Muskeg saw extensive use in logistical operations, especially in northern Canada and joint missions with the U.S. Army in Alaska. It was also repurposed for civilian roles like maintaining power lines and rescuing people in mountain regions. In fact, some units are still in use today in remote Canadian communities. And here's a fun twist. A modified Muskeg was once used in Arctic-themed movies, covered in shiny metal to make it look futuristic. Little did they know it was actually a military relic from the 1960s. Now hold on, because the next one is a Soviet armored tractor, straight out of a steel nightmare. T20 Komsomolets. Few outside military history circles have ever heard of the T20 Komsomolets, but once you've seen it, you won't forget it. It looks like a farm tractor that decided to go to war without bothering to change its clothes. Produced in the Soviet Union starting in 1936, the T20 was designed for one specific job: towing light artillery and transporting small groups of soldiers. But once World War II broke out, it ended up being used for a lot more than that. It had a 4-cylinder gasoline engine producing about 50 horsepower. Not much, but just enough to tow artillery and navigate the rough terrain of the Soviet front lines. Its design was unmistakable: wide tracks, an armored cabin in front, and an open compartment in the back where troops sat exposed. The engine made a dry, constant sound, like an old tractor trudging through thick mud. And while it did have armor up front, it wasn't very effective against heavier weapons. Still, the T-20 was widely used during the German invasion and served bravely. Some were even improvised into attack vehicles, fitted with machine guns or light cannons on the fly. Today, the Komsomolets is a rare museum piece. Restoring one is a huge challenge. Most were either destroyed or scrapped after the war. But anyone who's seen one up close agrees: ugly, boxy, strange. but absolutely fascinating. Think that was odd? The next one looks like a torpedo on tracks and was used in missions that sound like Soviet science fiction. ZIL-2906. Few machines in history cause as much visual shock as the ZIL-2906. Imagine a land torpedo with two massive screw propellers instead of wheels, designed to spin, dig, and crawl over terrain where nothing else could go. Yes, you read that right. Developed in the Soviet Union during the 1970s, the ZIL-2906 wasn't built for combat. It had a secretive and specialized role, retrieving space capsules that landed in remote, hostile regions of Siberia. Instead of wheels or tracks, it moved using two spiral-grooved rotating cylinders, turning in opposite directions. This allowed it to literally crawl across mud, snow, ice, swamps, you name it. Its gasoline-powered V8 engine produced around 160 horsepower, enough to move this metal beast weighing over 2 tons. The cabin was sealed and fit just 2 people. The sound of the cylinders churning against the ground was described as a cross between a turbine and a jackhammer. Visually, it looked completely insane, like something straight out of a Cold War sci-fi movie. And fittingly, hardly any photos of it reached the West during the Cold War, which only added to its mystique. Today, the ZIL-2906 is a legend among fans of experimental military vehicles. A few are tucked away in secret Russian museums. Some, they say, are still operational just in case a space capsule needs to be recovered in the middle of nowhere. Liking the weirdness so far? Then get ready. The next one is practically a tractor with a missile launcher and steel roller skates. Allis-Chalmers M7. Allis-Chalmers was known for making farm tractors in the United States, but war changes everything, and that's how the Allis-Chalmers M7 was born. A strange hybrid of tractor, launch platform, and tow vehicle. Visually, it looked like a regular tractor that gave up on trying to be pretty. With a wide body, tall tracks, and a flat front, the M7 towed a trailer packed with anti-aircraft missiles. A jarring contrast between lethal technology and rustic looks. Its 6-cylinder gasoline engine produced around 190 horsepower, enough to handle its heavy frame and tow the loaded trailer safely. The real highlight was its versatility. It could tow, launch, position, and stabilize missile platforms on uneven ground. But many operators said driving the M7 was like piloting a drunk tractor. Rough suspension, heavy steering, and almost no visibility. Still, it was widely used in missile bases and military training areas. The M7 wasn't flashy and rarely seen in parades or documentaries, but it played a critical role behind the scenes. Speaking of behind the scenes, the next machine looks like it came straight from the farm, but braved the Russian snow like a champ. StZ-5. The StZ-5 is the kind of vehicle that looks like it was cobbled together from leftover machine parts. And maybe it was. With straight lines, a square cabin, and high tracks, it resembled a shrunken truck trying to be a tractor. Visually, just plain weird. Built in the Soviet Union between the 1930s and 1940s, the StZ-5 was designed to tow artillery. No frills, no beauty, just pure function. It had a 4-cylinder gasoline engine producing about 52 horsepower. It was far from fast, but strong enough to pull cannons, haul ammo, and trudge through knee-deep mud on the Eastern Front. The cabin was tight and loud, barely fitting 2 squeezed-in soldiers with zero comfort. But what stood out most was how it moved. Slow, noisy, and with such a clumsy shape that many soldiers nicknamed it the dwarf tank. Despite the awkwardness, the StZ-5 was crucial in Soviet logistics. It kept artillery moving where trucks would bog down. Some were even fitted with rocket launchers or used as makeshift platforms for assault. Today, it's rare to find one still intact. Those who've seen one up close say it's a crooked machine that helped win battles. Ugly, yes, but tough as nails. And if you think that's weird, buckle up. The next one looks like a sardine can on wheels from World War I. 3-ton M1918. With a name that sounds like a forklift model and looks even humbler, the 3-ton M1918 was the first fully American-designed light tank. And when we say light, we really mean it. It looked like a mini armored soapbox car, short, narrow, and with a tiny turret on top. Built at the end of World War I, its goal was to be cheap, quick to produce, and support infantry units. It had a 4-cylinder engine delivering just 45 horsepower, driving rear tracks. The interior was so cramped that only 2 soldiers fit, one to drive, one to operate the machine gun. That's it, 2 men, packed into a metal box. The armor was thin, offering little protection, and the suspension was basically non-existent, making the ride incredibly rough. But its small size let it navigate tight paths and cross trenches with ease. Despite the almost comical appearance, the 3-ton N1918 was a landmark. It laid the foundation for future American light tank designs. And even though only about 100 units were built, it went down in history as America's first step into compact armored vehicles. Today, it's a museum piece. And funnily enough, many kids point at it thinking it's a toy, without realizing the serious history behind that tiny steel box. Now get ready, because up next is the undisputed champion of military ugliness. So bizarre, it became a meme, a legend, and a cautionary tale in military design. Reliant Rugged Robin. It might sound like a joke, but it's not. The Reliant Rugged Robin is perhaps the most improbable, unstable, and downright weirdest vehicle ever adapted for military use. And yes, it's based on that same 3-wheeled British car, famous for tipping over in corners. The idea came from a military experiment in the United Kingdom: create a cheap, lightweight vehicle for mail delivery, surveillance, or quick personnel transport. The base, the infamous Reliant Robin, one of the most mocked and ridiculed civilian cars in British history. So what was the problem? Everything. Starting with the design, it looked like a cross between a toy car and an inflatable scooter. The front end was low, the rear tilted upward, and that single front wheel made cornering downright dangerous. Its small 4-cylinder engine produced around 40 horsepower. Light and fuel efficient, sure, but totally incapable of handling rough terrain, or honestly, even a mildly bumpy road. Even on asphalt, its instability was legendary, with several reports of it tipping over during test runs while carrying light military gear. The suspension was fragile, the cabin cramped, and as for armor, there was basically none. The only real advantage was the extremely low cost, but even that failed, since constant breakdowns and accidents made the whole thing a logistical nightmare. Still, the Reliant Rugged Robin earned its place in military history as the perfect example of why not every cheap idea is a good one. It became a running joke among British soldiers and even made its way into comedy shows and parodies. But make no mistake, its spot on this list is well-deserved. It may not have won any battles, but it definitely claimed the title of the most bizarre military vehicle of all time. So, did you manage to keep a straight face until the end? Today we explored a little-known side of military history, one where strange visuals, bizarre designs, and even engineering mistakes turned into symbols of resilience, improvisation, and sheer ingenuity. Because on the battlefield, it's not about being pretty, it's about being useful, about doing what no other machine could. Even if it means looking like a crooked tractor, a torpedo with wheels, or a runaway toy car, these machines may not have the powerful presence of modern tanks or the style of classic military jeeps, but each one played its part with grit, and many of them carved a unique place in history. Now tell me in the comments, which of these vehicles did you find the most bizarre? Which one would you take just to drive around your property or impress your buddies? And which one would you never ever want to drive, even once? If you love this kind of content, don't forget to subscribe. Hit the notification bell and leave a like, because every week we bring you the most incredible, crazy, and unforgettable machines that defied logic and came out victorious. See you in the next video.